The U.S. Space Force is turning 2 years old this month. Congress created the service in 2019 to operate within the Air Force. The staff of Space Force is tasked with establishing a fully functioning headquarters, transferring forces into the service, and developing military space capabilities. My guest is Lieutenant General Nina Armagno. She's the Director of Staff at the Space Force. General, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
You know, I just mentioned your title, Director of Staff. You're the first one for Space Force. Explain your role.
My prime job is to synchronize the staff. We write policy, procedures, and it's all in an effort to bring together our headquarters to review any issues that are going on, bring relevant courses of action to General Raymond, our Chief of Space Operations, for his decision. But what's unique about our role today is that we are almost 2 years old. We are still quite new and growing staff. And so part of what we're doing in the Director of Staff is continuing to grow the staff from hiring and placing people into the correct roles and responsibilities, and writing policy, getting business tools that'll help us all synchronize better in a more digital way. And that's a unique difference between where the Space Force is today and my other fellow directors of staff in the other services who are much more mature than 2 years old.
So why create an entirely separate service for space? What's been the value added in the past 2 years?
I think the value added in the United States Space Force is it's actually very clear to me. The threat in the space domain has been accelerating, and the creation of the Space Force is a recognition that the threat exists. The space domain is no longer free. No longer a domain that we can operate freely in, I should say. And we have been created to not only continue to provide exquisite capabilities from space to the joint force, to all of our brother and sister services, but also to protect and defend that domain, because actors like Russia and China are actively working to threaten that domain.
How far from Earth is the Space Force's domain? Are we talking just low Earth orbit, medium Earth orbit, or beyond?
We're actually, our area of responsibility, and technically it's United States Space Command's area of responsibility as a combatant command. It begins about 1,000 kilometers from the Earth's surface, that is low Earth orbit. That's the home of our satellites that provide intelligence, reconnaissance, surveillance, also satellites that provide weather information, among others. That's low Earth orbit. We operate in medium Earth orbit as well, which is about 20,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface. That's the home of GPS, which everyone benefits from, their position, timing, and navigation data. And then geosynchronous orbit is about 37,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface. That's the home to our most strategic capabilities, our strategic missile warning satellites and our strategic military communication satellites. But the capabilities of, that's kind of our operating environment today. But as activities and commerce begin moving to the moon and beyond the bounds of Earth's gravity, our operating area and the area that the United States Space Force needs to organize, train, and equip our forces to operate in, that will extend beyond geosynchronous Earth orbit.
You know, General, creating a new service within the Defense Department is a huge undertaking. I don't need to tell you that. And you mentioned, you know, the challenges you're facing and continue to face with staffing. What other challenges have you faced and are currently facing?
We certainly have, and I wouldn't say it's necessarily a challenge in staffing. It's just kind of part of the process. You cannot snap your fingers and put 700 people on a staff. That's just not possible. There's a hiring process, and we're in the middle of it. We have almost 300 people now on the headquarters staff here in the Pentagon, and we're on our way to about 688 people. You compare that to other offices. I know of an office in the Air Force under the Secretariat that has about 1,200 people just in one office. And our entire service in the Pentagon is only going to have 688. So the challenge is going to be, how do we remain lean, agile, and mission focused in a bureaucracy where other services can just throw people at a problem, and we're going to have to stay focused on the mission and be able to operate with agility across the staff here. That is a challenge that we're well aware of, that we are facing today, and that we're learning the tricks of the trade, if you will. We're learning what it takes to operate with agility in the Pentagon and in this bureaucracy.
I want to ask you about norms of behavior in space. Chief of Space Operations General Raymond said in an op-ed recently that what some countries are doing in space is, quote, dangerous and irresponsible and cannot be ignored. What is Space Force's role in addressing that effort?
Our role is to work with the entities that are defining norms of behavior. So OSD policy in this building in the Pentagon here has taken the lead. The Department of State has a role. We certainly have an interest from a space perspective. I think you may have heard General Raymond say in the past, it's kind of like the wild, wild west out there, where there's really only one law written many years ago, and hardly any norms, and certainly not any international norms of behavior. Secretary of Defense Austin gave us 5 norms with which to live by, from professional behavior and no long-lived debris, from operating with professionalism and safety in our trajectory and safety and approach. These kinds of, relatively simple rules and should be easy to follow by all spacefaring nations.
And are you working directly with allies and partners internationally?
Allies and partners are certainly part of the discussion. And yes, the Space Force is working with allies and partners in this, for sure. Because it benefits all of us to have norms of behavior. And from a military perspective, it's important because then we'll know what's off nominal. We'll know what's not within a norm. And then we can better understand how to deal with a behavior that is not normal, and bad actors will be able to be called out quicker and with more precision, and that helps all of us.
And General, I want to ask you about what critics call the overclassification of space programs, because if you can't display your capability, you really don't have an effective deterrent. Do you agree with that?
I have heard both sides of this argument, and really at the end of the day, certain pieces of information are going to have to be classified. Yes, I know that we have overclassified a lot of capabilities, but really deterrence is in the mind of the beholder. It's in the mind of the adversary, and keeping some things classified will keep the adversary guessing. Revealing other capabilities can benefit deterrence as well. But when it's in the mind of the beholder, it's really more important to understand what Russia and China are thinking, rather than trying to declassify everything and be able to show all capabilities that we have. There's certainly some value in the guesswork.
Are there any new or unique approaches to acquisition that you're using to accelerate new space capabilities?
We are working very closely with the Department of the Air Force. They today have the role of space acquisition. We have a newly structured command, the Space Systems Command, run by Lieutenant General Gutlein, who has a fantastic experience. His entire career, of course, has been acquisitions, and he just came over from the National Reconnaissance Office. What we're trying to do is design our processes to be more streamlined, and we're asking for more authorities, to be honest, from Congress and others to give the Space Force more of a streamlined decision-making process, so that instead of going through all of the steps that are outlined in the DoD 5000, which is the acquisition reg, instead of going through all those steps, that we have some streamlined authorities that we can use, much like the National Reconnaissance Office has.
And what about the Space Development Agency within the Pentagon? How are you working with them?
They're going to be joining the Space Force here this year, and so we are working closely with Dr. Derek Tournier, who runs the Space Development Agency. They have, the way I look at what they're doing, I mean, this is just the way I characterize it. They're trying to hack commercial practices to bring more nimble capabilities and more nimble processes to the Space Force, which would be another way of accelerating acquisition. They're very key to what we're talking about when we say we need to build resilience into our architectures in space, because a resilient architecture is layered, it's hybrid, it's diverse, and one of those layers will be what Derek Tournier is working on, that is the transport layer in low Earth orbit. So they're crucial and key to what we're building here in the United States Space Force.
General, is there a possibility of combat in space, and are you prepared for that?
I would say that no one wants war in space. No one wants to fight in the space domain. And we're preparing, unfortunately, because of what we've seen in countries like Russia and China. We're preparing to protect and defend our exquisite capabilities and the amazing information that we can provide to our joint warfighters from space. That's why the Space Force exists. That's why we were stood up, to protect and defend that domain. No one wants war in that domain, but here's another thing. The United States does not need to fight in space in order to have effects in the space domain, or effects that will benefit the space domain. The United States can respond in any other domain militarily, and we can pull the levers of national power that it doesn't have to be the military lever of national power to affect the space domain.
Could the Space Force send people into space, or will that just be NASA?
Today, that's just NASA. We do get this question a lot, and it's fun to think about a future that is like Star Wars. But I have to tell you that today we have certainly enough challenges just protecting and defending, designing architectures that can be resilient, that are within the bounds of gravity. So for the foreseeable future, no Guardians in space.
All right, well, General, happy birthday to the Space Force, and thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Semper Supra.